A very good morning to all our esteemed guests on the virtual platform. May I just take this opportunity to introduce myself and the purpose of the session today. Shireen, allow me just to check with you if there is any other guests whom we are expecting who's not on the platform. Would like to give them that honor so that when we start this meeting, they are a part of the meeting.
Good morning. We just have two changes. Good morning to everyone. We just have two minor changes for now. Program Director, the Public Protector will join us at 9:45. So she's not on the platform just yet. And then, of course, the other changes you will announce as you proceed. For now, I think we have everyone online. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, colleagues. My name is Neptune Masombuka, and I'm the director of this dialogue today. In our midst, allow me to recognize our esteemed guests, our Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Thembisile Simelane in absentia, former Minister of Public Service and Administration and Chairperson of Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Ms. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, our Deputy Minister, Mr. Andries Nel, the Director General of the DOJ and CD, Advocate Doc Mashabane, NDPP, Mayor Advocate Shamila Batoyi, PP, who is going to join us in some few minutes, Advocate Kollega, Chairperson of the Commission of Gender Equality, Advocate Ndabiseng Sibanya Mohali, Commissioner of the South African Human Rights Commission, Ms. Ndabiseng Kwinana, President of the South African Women's Lawyers Association, Menoma Shabangu, our esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure to welcome you to this significant virtual dialogue, one of its own kind, themed celebrating 30 years of democracy towards women's development. We all know that this is a day that many of us have been waiting for. And in the preparations, of course, a team has been hard at work, and we really want to appreciate their efforts. Colleagues, this day, as it's hosted by the Department of Justice, seeks, of course, to underscore the important role that legal frameworks play in protecting women's rights and protecting gender equality. There couldn't have been any other better time that we host this particular seminar and or dialogue, especially as the country wraps up the Women's Month, reflecting on the contributions of women who fought for democracy and celebrating 30 years of democracy. Furthermore, it is essential to consider the vision outlined by our president for the future we aim to build, particularly from the perspective of women legal professionals. This virtual conference, colleagues, and our esteemed guest is not just a gathering of minds, but a call to action. Our goal today is to enhance the understanding of the laws affecting women's lives in South Africa, identifying existing gaps and exploring ways to ensure that these laws translate into real, tangible empowerment. Throughout this session, a 2.5 session, we will hear from experts, activists, policymakers, who will share their insights on current state of women's rights in our legal system and the steps we must take to strengthen these protections. In the next 2.5 hours, we will, of course, share with those within this platform the deep insights of the current state of women's rights in our legal systems. And we believe that these engagements are very critical in the current setup and the challenges that we're facing as women. The DOJ and Constitutional Development welcomes you all to this important dialogue, and we look forward to a robust, frank, and an open dialogue. I therefore implore of you to sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee. We have done you a favor. We have muted all the mics unless at the time you will be on stage. All phones on silence, and let's enjoy the dialogue. Without much ado, I will be calling on our Deputy Minister. However, before I do so, I want to just alert you of the changes in terms of the minor changes on our program. The DG is only going to join us later in the program, and he will only render the services of closing remarks of this very session. As we proceed then, before our Deputy Minister takes on stage, allow me to introduce him with these few words. Mr. Andries Nel, born in a vibrant city of New Orleans, where his father was a South African at the time. His interest in politics, human rights, and justice began whilst in a high school in Brazil. Back in South Africa, he studied law at the University of Pretoria and actively participated in anti-apartheid movement by joining structures like the National Union of South Africa Students, the South African Student Press Union, Students for Democratic Society, Students for Human Rights, and conscription campaign. As a lawyer, he worked for Lawyers for Human Rights from 1990 to 1994, heading the LHR's Capital Punishment and Penal Reform Project. Deputy Minister Nel's commitment to justice and human rights led him into politics, serving on the ANC's Constitutional Assembly Committee and as a coordinator of the legal and monitoring team and ANC's National Elections team. He became a member of Parliament for the African National Congress in 1994. Over the years, he has worn various hats, both in Parliament and as an executive. He served on various portfolio committees and was the whip of Justice Portfolio Committee and a House whip from 2000 to 2002. He was appointed as Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC from 2002, as Acting Chief Whip of the ANC from 2006, and as a Chairperson of the National Assembly between 2008 to 2009. He also served in various ad hoc committees, as well as parliamentary committees such as the Joint Rules, Program Committees, the Chief Whips Forum, and Parliamentary Oversight Authority. He was appointed as Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development from 2009 to 2013, and as a Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs from 2013 to 2019. Between 2019 to 2024, he returned to work at Luthuli House, the ANC headquarters, as a coordinator of the ANC's National Executive Committee and its National Work Committee. After the May 2024 general elections, he was appointed for the second term as a Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. On that note, help me to welcome our Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister, over to you.
Program Director, thank you very, very much for that kind, albeit somewhat lengthy introduction, which might just be a little bit longer than my input. But if I may just, very, very good morning to all, and I associate myself very fully with the protocol that the program director has observed, including the recognition of my very long-standing comrade, friend, and colleague, former Minister Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, and the NDPP and the Public Protector and all distinguished participants in this important dialogue. And I think also just to extend both the apology of my, but also my appreciation to Minister Simelane for also asking me to be representing her in this dialogue. I think we can, as South Africans, we have a just and a legitimate pride as we celebrate 30 years of our constitutional democracy. But that pride is not a pride of arrogance. It is a pride that derives from the fact that we know that collectively we have struggled long and hard to attain this democracy. And because we know that that struggle was such a difficult and painful struggle, we also know that realizing the full promise of the Constitution and the constitutional democracy that we fought so long and hard for equally is not going to be an easy task. And it's also, there can be no doubt that we would not be here and would not be able to celebrate our freedom as a nation if it were not for women and their tremendous contribution to the struggle for liberation and the attainment of democracy. The period before 1994 was characterized by the systematic and systemic violation of human rights on a scale unfathomable for many today. It was Black women in particular who were chained by the triple yoke of oppression, and under apartheid, race, sex, and class, all combined in a triple oppression and a complete lack of social equality for the vast majority of South Africans and women in particular. This led to the historic march in 1956, when women from all races and from all over the country took to the union buildings in the fight for freedom, for a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and united South Africa. This was a turning point in the fight against unjust laws and the apartheid regime. We've come a long way since then, indeed. Not only do we have a constitution with a Bill of Rights, which guarantees human dignity, freedom, and equality, but we've also passed, since 1994, a vast array of other laws to prevent discrimination and to strengthen women's rights and gender equality. We have women represented in all our democratic institutions, across all arms of state, and in all spheres of government. For those like former Minister Fraser-Moleketi and I, who were part of the first democratic parliament, we can recall very vividly the institution that we came across when we entered there in 1994. We recall very vividly the fact that there was, I think, if I recall correctly, not a single Director General of a national department that was a woman. That ministers before 1994 had also been very, very few and far between. But also then for us in the legal profession and in the area of justice, last year we celebrated the centenary of the passing of the 1923 law, which allowed women to be legal practitioners. The Women Legal Practitioners Act 7 of 1923 provided that women shall be entitled to be admitted to practice and be enrolled as advocates, attorneys, notaries, public, or conveyancers, subject to the same terms and conditions as apply to men, close quote. But we know that the application of the same terms and conditions under vastly unequal social conditions generally is not true equality. Today, women have taken their rightful place in the legal profession, in our courts, as prosecutors, as magistrates, as judges, and we have our first female Chief Justice. If one looks at the leadership of the magistracy, 10 out of 12 of the chief magistrates are women, 5 out of the regional court presidents are women. Today, we have a bench which better reflects the diversity of our country. The United Nations has stated that women's representation in the judiciary is key to ensuring that courts represent their citizens, address their concerns, and hand down sound judgments informed by the life experience of all in our society. By their mere presence, women judges enhance the legitimacy of our courts, sending a powerful signal that they are open and accessible to those who seek recourse to justice. We can testify to these very essential changes that women now have taken center stage in the betterment of our economy as business owners and leaders in the private sector. We often say that we must do more, quote unquote, we must do more to support women. But what do we mean by that? What does support mean in real and practical terms? Are we doing enough to support women in the legal profession, in business, in the workplace in general? I was reading an article by Judge Poyo Dwati, where she talks about how she established her own firm, Nobo, Poyo, and Diedrich's Attorneys, and where she stayed until her appointment as a judge in 2014. In the article, she says that, quote, while juggling the demands of a busy attorney's practice and being a new mother, Poyo Dwati also played an active role in the affairs of the legal profession in what can easily be described as an activist streak. She joined the Black Lawyers Association's Pietermaritzburg branch at the very commencement of her career in 1997 and later became its secretary and chairperson. She was also the secretary of the KZN branch of the South African Women Lawyers Association, the vice president and later president of the SADC Lawyers Association, representing the interests of lawyers from 16 Southern African countries. Perhaps more importantly, she became the first Black woman vice president and later president of the KZN Law Society, close quote. What struck me was a description of how she had to juggle the demands of a busy legal practice whilst also being a new mother. And this, once again, made me ask the question, are we adequately supporting women in the legal profession, in business, and in the workplace in general? In terms of representativity, we're not yet where we want to be. The Commission of Employment Equity's 2023 report shows that male representation in our country is dominant at top management level at over 73%, which is more than double the percentage of female representation at 26%. The situation is slightly better in government, but progress in terms of affirming women still remains slow, particularly in the private sector at this level. Women still face a number of significant barriers in the workplace, which can hinder their career progression and overall job satisfaction, such as gender bias in hiring, promotions, and evaluations. For some, balancing professional responsibilities with caregiving duties can be challenging, and some workplaces lack flexible policies that support this balance. Women are sometimes underrepresented in executive and leadership positions. This lack of representation can limit their influence and opportunities for advancement. Some may also experience limited access and fewer opportunities for mentorship and sponsorship, which are crucial for career development and advancement. Women are also more likely to experience sexual harassment in the workplace, which can create a hostile and unsafe environment. Addressing these barriers requires concerted efforts from organizations, policymakers, and society to create more equitable and inclusive workplaces. We can pass the best laws as a country, but we need to address these challenges also by implementing these best laws in our country. Empowering women in South Africa is more than an act of social justice. It is a fundamental building block for national growth and prosperity. The empowerment of women in South Africa is about dealing with the legacy of apartheid and the transformation of society, particularly the transformation of unequal power relations between women and men, and the need for fundamental changes to institutions and laws. It's also about addressing gender oppression, patriarchy, sexism, racism, ageism, and structural oppression, and creating a conducive environment which enables women to take control of their lives. Understanding the significance of equipping women with leadership roles, skills development, and economic opportunities is key to unlocking the potential of our nation. Whilst we celebrate all these important changes, we should be mindful of the fact that women still face deep-seated challenges and serious violations of their human rights. Women also continue to bear the brunt of the triple threats of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, mainly along racial lines. Women in rural areas, including the girl child, face dual challenges, including underdevelopment and illiteracy, as well as forced marriages perpetrated against the girl child in some places in South Africa. National Women's Day and Month provides a platform to leverage awareness, accountability, and action, buttressed by sustained advocacy campaigns and interventions around issues of gender equality. Today's dialogue also aims to delve into the issues regarding possible strategies to ensure a new narrative regarding women's rights and women's empowerment. I want to conclude with the words of a song that many of you may know, called God Bless the Woman by Lucky Dube. I'm going to read and not sing, regrettably. Not only because I have a very, very serious flu, but even if I didn't, I don't think I would do justice. But the lyrics go, we praise heroes every day, but there are those that we forget to praise. The women of this country, they don't run from anything. They stand and fight for what's right. God bless the woman. Even when times are so hard, they are so cool, calm, and collected. They don't run from anything. They stand and fight for what is right. They do not run from responsibilities. They stand and fight for what is right. Thank you very much for your participation in this very important dialogue that we hope will be the first of many, many other dialogues of this nature. As we deliberate on these issues, let us bear in mind that when you empower a woman, you empower the nation. Malibongwe, igama lamakosikazi. I thank you.
PM, thank you very much. We have heard you. Indeed, we will ensure that your bio is shortened. And thank you. Thank you very much. As you spoke, TM, you remind us of Prof. Nkosinathi Sithole from KZN University, who went on research, and he says, I quote, laws that protect and empower women are not just legal instruments. They are declarations of our commitment to a future where gender no longer determines one's possibilities. Indeed, the day today will see us in a symphony. We are indeed, as women, going to dialogue around these issues and how we then advance a masterpiece of equality and empowerment. On that note, allow me to call on our esteemed and one of the very long-serving member of this department, Advocate Susan Masapu, the Chief State Law Advisor. Mayor Masapu, over to you.
Morning, Program Director. Morning, DM, for the illuminating insights. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dumelang, Sanibonani, Lekai. Oh, yes, this is so fitting. it's happening during this month, which is known as a very important month for women of Mzansi, because that is the month, which is a month on which we celebrate the tribute of the women of 1956, when they marched to the union buildings to submit a petition to Straydom, challenging the apartheid laws, the past laws. After submitting that petition, they stood for 30 minutes and started chanting, Watinta Bafazi, Watinta Imbogodo, Uzakufa, Wena Straydom. Rumor has it that he ran away, literally, using the back of the union buildings instead of coming to the front, running away from the Mogodo, the women who were even carrying children with them, because most of them were unemployed. Most of them were from rural areas. The thing called the phone for organization or organizing meeting was just an unheard of thing. But they organized women successfully to march to the union building, to challenge the regime during that time. Their efforts were not in vain. If you look at what is happening now, 1994, we attained our freedom. But with that freedom, then we also revised the interim constitution, the 1993 one, to have what is now called the constitution that we have, the 1996 one. In that constitution, a lot of things have been protected, especially in the Bill of Rights. The rights of women have also been protected there. If you look at chapter 9 of the Constitution, it talks of equality. Towards the end, there's a talk of legislation and other measures must be taken to ensure that the rights in this Bill of Rights are promoted. So the women that we have today as panelists, they're actually the women who are standing on the shoulders of those women of 1996 and 1956, I'm sorry, who marched to the union buildings. They are also the women who are standing on the shoulders of the first women to practice law. As you are all aware, previously, women were not regarded as persons for purposes of practicing law. It was only later on, after a lot of hardships, that in 1923, Irene Geffen became the first woman to be admitted as an advocate. So when you say I'm advocate so-and-so, think back of what happened to those who were regarded as being not persons for purposes of practicing law or for purposes of becoming attorneys or advocates. That saying that, it was also followed by Constance Mary Hall in 1926, being the first woman to be admitted as an attorney. However, there was a lull. You know, the system operates strangely. You may be a woman, but depending on whether you are white or you are black, of African origin, black, of colored origin, black, of Indian origin, things will happen slightly slower for you. So for blacks of African origin, it was only in 1967 that Desiree Finca was admitted as the first black female attorney. So now, when you look back now and just say, okay, we have so many advocates now, we've got so many attorneys. Half the time when you say attorney so-and-so or advocate so-and-so, think of the struggles which were waged by women from 1956 Not even only 1956. If you remember, there was a potato strike in Mpumalanga, the area which is now called Mpumalanga. Women were deeply involved in those strikes and the struggles. So 1956 was like that very, very important event, because now women from all over South Africa or from all over Mzansi gathered at the Union Buildings. But from there on, with the coming into being of our democracy, 1994 elections, the constitution, yes, we have a constitution which is written, very clear, it has a Bill of Rights, but half the time we look back and say, oh, a lot of strides have been made. But I still feel a lot more still needs to be done to push our country forward to a better life for all, not only for women, but for all. So our panelists today are the people who have taken the baton seriously from their predecessors to steer the Titanic, not the proverbial one which drowned. This one won't sink. They are steering this Titanic, the one that will never sink, to the right direction, holding batons in their own hands. And hopefully they're going to hand over the batons to other very capable women. So our panelists are the following. We have a successful executive director, a seasoned board member with a wealth of experience gained across the fields of general commercial and corporate law, reputation management, as well as brand building. She is passionate, very passionate, I must say, about developing strong, mutually beneficial relationships with key business partners. And key to her success is the ability to effectively lead others, prioritize, manage multiple projects in fast-paced and high-pressured environment, along with being able to accurately navigate ever-changing business dynamics. She's no other, ladies and gentlemen, she's no other. She is Zodwa Veleman. Please join me to welcome her to the panel. Our second panelist is no other. I don't even have to introduce her. She is one of those young, dynamic women who have been fighting for Gogo Dlaminis. I mean, half the time people used to say, the Office of the Public Protector is just there to fight political battles. But with her now being there and taking a leaf from her predecessors, we can see that a lot is happening to improve or to better the lives of the Gogo Dlamini, the granny, the children, and then the grandchildren of Gogo Dlamini also. She's fighting that fierce battle in her little corner. She is no other than Advocate Koleka Tsaleka, the current public protector. Please join me in welcoming her to the platform. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our next panelist is Advocate Pavel Matthews. Oh yes, she worked at Investec until 2017. Currently, Pavel is working at Absa Group, where she holds the position of head CIB, secondary markets, legal and principal legal counsel. This is a very important role because, I mean, as women, we are made to believe that you need a husband to take care of your finances. But we have a woman now who is taking care of finances of institutions. Please help me and join me in welcoming Advocate Matthews. She has over 13 years of work experience in the legal field also. She's not only into finances, but legal is also her terrain. Our third panelist also doesn't need to be introduced. She once worked for the Department of Justice. She started her career more than 30 years ago as a social worker before she decided to pursue qualifications in legal and other fields. Throughout her career, she has been a trailblazer and a leader in and outside the public service. In 2003, she joined the public service, working for the NPA, and was later appointed the founding director of the Anti-Racism and Anti-Xenophobia Unit at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. She also worked as a municipal manager for the Randfontein local municipality and Deputy Director General at the Gauteng Department of Social Development before joining the Johannesburg Bar of Advocates, where she completed her pupillage and practice as an advocate until early 2023. She is no other, that is Advocate Nthabiseng Sipanya Mohale, the chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality. The next panelist also doesn't need much of an introduction. She's a prosecutor, and she began her career as a junior prosecutor in Chatsworth Magistrate Courts in 1986, and steadily advanced to become the Director of Public Prosecution in KwaZulu-Natal. She was seconded to the Investigation Task Unit established by President Nelson Mandela then in 1995, and later served as the first regional head of the Directorate of Special Operations based in KZN. She is Shamila Batoy, our current National Director of Public Prosecution. Please, let's put our hands together to welcome her to the panel. Our next panelist is a lawyer. She's an admitted attorney. She holds an LLB and B Juris degrees from the University of Northwest and has been the director of Mthimkhulu Kwinana Attorneys since 2001. She is responsible for criminal and civil litigation. She's a very accomplished lawyer in her own right. Our next panelist is no other. She's also an admitted attorney, founder and sole member of Nongaswazi Shabangu Attorney, a law firm based in Mbombela, Mpumalanga. She is the current president of SAULA, an association that focuses on gender equality in the legal profession and empowerment of the women lawyers. She further holds positions as country vice president of International Federation of Women Lawyers, that is FIDA in South Africa, and is a member of the Judicial Service Commission, which is responsible for the recommendations of people to the judge, to the president, who should be appointed as judges. She is Miss Shabangu Mndawe Nomaswazi. Welcome her to the panel. Help me by clapping hands to welcome her as part of the panelists. Our last and final panel member is an admitted advocate of the High Court of South Africa with an unbreakable commitment to social justice and the upliftment of young people. She's currently completing her pupillage at the Johannesburg Society of Advocates. She holds an LLB degree and LLM with specialization in constitutional law and philosophy in law. Please, let's put our hands together to welcome Sinako Bomela Mbokodo. I've introduced to you the Mbokodos who are going to lead us in this discussion, in this webinar. Malibongwe. Malibongwe. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks.
Introduce me.
Ladies and gentlemen, now that we're done with the panel, these things normally have a person called the moderator. Our moderator is the DDG in the Department of Justice, the branch Constitutional Development, which is responsible for all things constitutional in this country. She has worked as an advisor in the global policy on human rights in UN Bureau for Development. She has worked in New York. She has worked in Geneva, Eritrea, the South Sudan, dealing with matters pertaining to women. And she didn't fail us. That is why when the search was on for a person who can run this division, the branch Constitutional Development, her name came first. She was interviewed, became our current DDG in Constitutional Development. Her name is Shireen Said. She's an advocate also. If you look at the lineup, most of the ladies happen to be advocates who are standing on the shoulders of those who started being admitted as advocates and attorneys in 2023, in 1923, 1926, and 1967. That's Shireen Said. You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, I realized that I had not, I was still muted. Thank you very much, Mema Sapu. Thank you very much, Imbogodo. Wathinta Mfazi, Wathinta Mbogodos. So, Advocate Said, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for all those introductions. Susan, as you were saying, reminding us of our history, it gave me goosebumps to feel the weight of being female lawyer in this country, and also to be in this position where we can serve our country within the Department of Justice. As you were speaking, I realized sitting here in our office in Pretoria, we overlook Freedom Park. And it was quite poignant because across on the other side of the building, you see the union buildings, and you can picture that march on the one hand, and then the spirit of enlightenment when you look over at Freedom Park. So thank you. I'm joined by a esteemed panel, and thank you to all of you who have joined us online. It's quite a number. I think we've almost hit over 100 people at this point, and I'm quite happy because I'm seeing more numbers joining us. We have a lot to say, and at the same time, not the greatest amount of time, and we want to do justice to the rest of the program. So again, from our side, thank you for joining us. I'm going to get us right onto the panel discussion, and we will park your questions for later on the chat, and we will pose them as the dialogue proceeds. I will start now with asking each of the panelists. I will call on them, each of the panelists, to give us some opening remarks, and we'll have some follow-up from panel members, and thereafter we will jump onto the question and answer session. So, Commissioner of the Gender Equality, we're very pleased to have you with us. And yours is a mighty responsibility because you hold us all and give us the direction that we need for the transformation. As DM said, we've come incredibly far, but we still got a much longer way to go. So Commissioner and Chairperson, would you just give us your sense of some of the mammoth tasks that lay ahead for you, and also give us a reflection on how far we've come and whether the current legal architecture that we have is sufficient. What are some of your thoughts? What are the discussions at the Commission for Gender Equality that you and your colleagues have to take on a daily basis? Over to you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Shireen. Shireen, my screen keeps playing up. It's showing all sorts of things. So do you mind if I could speak? Can you hear me?
We hear you quite well. And if you can't put on your screen, well, that's quite all right. We'll see if we can help, but let's go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, because something keeps blocking the screen. So I will just speak. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude for being part of this dialogue. I think we need more of such, but I think we also are at a time when such reflections are more important than ever before. We come a long way as a country in South Africa, there's no doubt. Prior to 1994, we had only 2.7% of women representation in our South African parliament. That is the apartheid parliament. South Africa was one of the last to introduce full voting rights for all women, which only happened at the dawn of its democracy in 1994. The National Assembly started off very well with 26% of women in the first administration in 1994. These were all seasoned women leaders chosen on merit, and their gender was just added bonus, although this does not mean that gender was not intentionally considered. There was a long list of legislation since 1994 that was introduced, but the most powerful is the Constitution itself, which obviously the process started in 1993, and then the final version was in 1996. But the Constitution itself, its founding provisions include non-sexism, non-racism. You've got Section 3 of the Constitution, which talks about equal citizenship. And this is powerful in the sense that we all know at some point we were not equal citizens, but it is now enshrined in our Constitution. We've got the Bill of Rights, where in Section 7 of the Bill of Rights, the Rights Clause states that the state must respect, protect, and promote the bills in the Bill of Rights. This is actually also a powerful provision because it puts the responsibility where it should be, on the duty bearer. And the state has so far made all attempts to bring this to realization. There's also Section 9, which is the Equality Clause, expressly stating that everyone is equal before the law and everyone is equal in our diversity. And then we've got Section 10, which for me is a redress measure in the sense that it talks about inherent dignity. We know that at some point, we didn't have that inherent dignity as Black people in South Africa. A lot has been done, as I've said, with regards to bringing these provisions in the Constitution to life by enacting legislation. This legislation, I'll be a bit biased here and say it includes the CGE Act itself. Women and activists at the time took an intentional decision to have an entity such as the CGE as a standalone oversight state independent entity to redress measures for women, as they were the main victims of triple oppression. It has been mentioned by the Deputy Minister, the triple oppression of class, race, and gender. It was a well thought out approach, considering that women were far behind and still regarded as minors with no rights in the society we were inheriting in 1994. You have several of them, your Domestic Violence Act, which has recently been amended and enhanced in terms of effectiveness, your choice of pregnancy Termination of Pregnancy Act, Recognition of Customary Marriages Act, Maintenance Labor Relations Act, Basic Conditions, and the IEC Act itself. And why I am mentioning and having this bias towards C9s, I think it's important that we now begin to put them at the center of the reflections that we're having, because it is the rights that are being overseen by these C9s that actually bring the values and vision of the contribution of the Constitution to life. The IEC Act is that instrument that says each and every person who is eligible should be made to vote. Equally, we have policy frameworks and related instruments were developed in all sectors of our government and measures put in place for business, civil society, and citizens broadly to comply with. There's no doubt that the commitment was in place in 1994. The context in 1994, however, was slightly different. In 1994, we had 19 political parties that were contesting the elections, as compared to the current in 2024, which was 52 plus independents. And we must remember that these 52 was a fraction of the many who had expressed interest to participate, but ultimately could not for various reasons. In 1994, we had only 22.4 eligible voters. And out of the 22.4 eligible voters, 22.4 million, eligible voters. Out of the 22.4 million, 19.7 million went to vote and expressed a view in terms of them wanting a particular government that will protect them and ensure that their democracy is achieved. This is compared to the 27.7 million that were eligible in 2024 to vote, and only 16.2 million turned up to vote. This means in 1994, 86% of eligible voters turned out. And in 2024, only 58% turned out. Of the 27.6 eligible voters, 15.2 million were women and 12.3 were men. Despite this 58% of eligible voters being women, in the 2024 elections, ironically, 58% of the candidates were male, as opposed to 42% of the candidates being female. Only 15 political parties of the 52 for 2024 had 50% and above women representation, which means a majority of them actually shied away from the 52 and above. This also is in spite of the population of South Africa standing at 51.4% women as opposed to 48.6% men. The strength of 1994 is that extensive voter education and activism was undertaken around the inclusion of women as voters, as public representatives, and as a sector with opinions to take the country forward. In 1994, the National Women's Coalition, led by the national convener, Dr. Frene Ginwala, was visible and strong in expressing the interest of women and educating women to question parties about interests relevant to them as women. This entity was one of many advocating for inclusion as leadership and voices of women being heard. At the time, the key message was that the right to vote is a valuable means to express citizenship and accompanying benefits. This resulted in 26% of public representatives being women, as I've already mentioned, with a steady rise to 46% in 2023-24 with the sixth administration. Since 1994, women have always been the majority of voters. At the time, the population was 43, and it has now risen 43 million, and it has now risen to 63 million. Of the 63 million, 32.1 of the 63 are women, making us 51.4% of the South African population, still a majority, albeit a narrowed one. The rise in representation is unfortunately very skewed. Only a few parties embrace the leadership and representation of women. In addition, women's interests have fallen off the table to a large extent. In 1994, the interest was freedom and equality and starting anew within a democratically enabling environment. In the early 2000s, the interests were tangible social justice rights, such as dealing with HIV, economic inclusion, and general safety. However, in 2024, the interest shifted to safety as a primary issue that was expressed by the citizens of South Africa against the high levels of crime in society and even in our homes, as we are aware of the high levels of GBV and AF. High levels of poverty, high levels of unemployment, and debilitating and decaying social fabric as a result of drug and alcohol abuse and misuse. And above all, a non-responsive economy that further stalls development and deepens the social challenges mentioned above. This points to a deterioration of the quality of life and thus poses a threat to those values that the Constitution carries. The values of equality, human dignity, development, economic emancipation, transparency, and accountability, amongst others. The question then should be, what can we do to return to the 68% voter turnout of 1994? We need to go back and prioritize education, but this must not only be general education, but constitutional principles and values education around those principles and values, which would then emphasize issues of equality, issues of economic emancipation, and issues of human dignity, because that's where the loss has walked. But this—
Chairperson, if I may, we'll give you a round a little later to come up with these recommendations that you're coming up. So if we may ask you to pause for a second, and we'll move over with that tone that you've set, flagging all the challenges that we have. I'd love to now go over to our recently appointed commissioner to the South African Human Rights Commission, also a member of SAULA, and someone who's also worked very hard in the area of providing mentorship and support to young women lawyers through the Vance Center for International Justice and our local chapter, Women in the Workplace. So Advocate Noma Shlube, we're happy to welcome you. Some responses to the chairperson's inputs this morning, as well as look at the intersectionality, because the Human Rights Commission, and we have that challenge, as we've always called it in our country, I never know, is it a double jeopardy, as we say in law, or triple jeopardy in terms of human rights, gender equality, as well as our threats of poverty, as Diem had earlier alluded to. So what are the conversations within the Human Rights Commission space to be able to, and how do you respond to that from the Human Rights Commission? Because yours is also a major mandate, having just taken over your portfolio at the Human Rights Commission. Over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you so much, DDG. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really, I must say that
There you are.
Yes, as the new commissioner, the space is not that easy to navigate, because one needs to really find information, and where you can't find it, it really becomes cumbersome. But I must say that coming into that space, for us really as a commission, we always go back to what is our mandate. And really our mandate is about human rights, and human rights in total. And of course, me being a feminist, there have been over the years, as you have pointed out in the profession, I've tried to occupy almost any space that I've found myself in. A reason being that I just wanted to see that, is it true that women belong in the kitchen, or that really we belong anywhere where we want to be? And that's how I've been navigating the space. So really, what we have been doing is looking at what legislation is out there that will be able to assist us to really achieve what the Deputy Minister has looked at, which is Section 9. And I think also the Chief State Law Advisor, Mema Sapo, also mentioned, equality in South Africa remains a challenge. We are really from a very unequal society. And whilst we're trying to balance that, one would have to look at the legislature. And what we found is that in terms of legislation, we have beautiful legislation out there, but the implementation is a problem. We really need to move to a point where we can say that it has been tried and tested, and maybe it hasn't worked. But what we note is that there aren't tools which allows us to take stock of where we are in terms of the very legislation. And to an extent that we said to ourselves, we need to come up with a tool. And being a commissioner responsible for persons with disability, I was excited to note that there's a tool that was developed as far back as 2017, which is supposed to assist insofar as taking stock of whether everyone else is complying with regard to persons with disability. But that tool has not yet been used. And it is our intention as Human Rights Commission really to look at the entire spectrum. So we go to public sector and private sector, and we are going to make sure that we take stock of whether it has been implemented so that we can at least bridge the gap. So that's how we see ourselves really making that difference. So except for coming up with reports and really taking stock, but most importantly, we go deeper into these issues in order to investigate. And of course, those that are found to be wanting where the process are concerned, we will bring to book. And that is a course that we have set to ourselves as a commission. We are going to take forward. Thank you, DDG.
Thank you very much. You've both given a good reflection of where we've come from in 30 years and what the status is in the country. I'd like now to call on someone who is one of the more younger lawyers, and whom, as Susan has said, we were going to hand over the baton. And she is Advocate Senako Lindazwe. And I just wanted to augment the introduction given earlier. She is now actually holding chambers at Thulamela Chambers. And I had the distinct pleasure this past weekend to speak at the event that Advocate Senako had put together with a group of young lawyers, and some of whom are law students, under the banner of this movement and institution that she's set up. In 3 years, it's really become an institution for young lawyers in the country. That is Senako We Can movement. And she's been the recipient in this very short time in the profession, which really speaks to her commitment to justice, of the top 200 young South African lawyers, or Young South Africans award from the Mail and Guardian. She also received the top outstanding young persons of South Africa award from the Junior Chamber International in 2019. And yesterday evening, she also received an award from the Northwest. And the kind of work that you're doing, really, especially as it came been through this past weekend really is setting up the younger lawyers with the kind of support, mentorship, dialogues, and capacity building. So from your perspective, Advocate Lendazwe, and thank you for joining us at the short notice, where do you see us going? Having heard some of these challenges that we have, what are the projections from your campaigns and as you mobilize the young leaders with all the initiatives that you've started out? Over to you, and I will give you a second bite at the cherry a little later. So if we could confine your initial comments to no more than 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Shireen. It's such a great pleasure to be invited to speak on this platform. As young as I am, I'm actually particularly proud to sit on a panel of discussion with women at the forefront in shaping the future of our society. And for me, I think one of the important things that I want to highlight is that there's so many policies in place, so many policies that have been put together over the past 30 years. I mean, we have the most incredible constitution in South Africa. However, I think it is very important for us moving towards the future to reflect on how exactly are we going to take a step into the direction where we see that transformation is not only seen to be done, but it is actually a tangible tool towards seeing a difference in our society. And one of those tools, I think for me, is people actually being intentional about enforcement. And as I reflect into the legal profession, for example, I look at organizations such as the Legal Practice Council, which has been very deliberate about the stance that it takes in the legal profession. I mean, for the first time in South Africa, on the 5th of August 2024, the Legal Practice Council introduced a notice where legal professionals, candidate attorneys will for the first time have a minimum wage which they should be paid. I mean, these are vulnerable young legal professionals that have entered the profession. We know how vulnerable they are. We know how they have been abused in the past. You know, we know that most of them are women that are just entering the profession and can barely make ends meet. And previously, before this was enacted, there was no regulation on how much they should be paid. And also, very importantly, for the first time in history, pupils who take on pupillage will also be paid a stipend monthly. As a young professional who's also served pupillage, I've seen how young professionals can enter the profession, which speaks to the transformation in South Africa, and the books look good in terms of statistics. However, how many of those young people that enter the profession are able to sustain? I think acts like this from the Legal Practice Council, which are intentional, signify how we as people who hold the power have the power to make the policies that are in place be not only sound on paper, but actually be seen as tangible tools towards transformation in South Africa. I think that's one of the things that we should be doing or looking forward to into the future. As it stands, 74% of professionals at the bar are male and only 25% are female. And of those statistics, only 155 females make it to 5+ years at the bar, and only 12 out of the entire bar in South Africa are senior counsel who are women. So the increasing in representation is one of the tools of showing where transformation has gone. However, ensuring that in the years to come, there are more people that stay at the bar, there are more people that get to be in senior positions, and of course, one day become judges in our country who are seen as compatible. It also speaks to the work that we are given deliberately by our colleagues, deliberately by the government departments. I mean, I will also speak on the issue of, briefing patterns at the bar, as a person who's been here for 4 years plus, all the times that I have been working in government briefs, for example, I have been roped in by my male counterparts. And behind the scenes, we are doing the work, which shows that as women, we are competent. We are the drivers of change in our society. Our first female Chief Justice has recently been appointed, who has affirmed and speaks to our competence as women. So as a young woman who sits here today, I implore on all stakeholders and all women, particularly in the forefront of shaping the future, to take a stand and work together towards enforcing the policies that are currently in place to expedite the transformation of women in the judiciary and the legal profession. Thank you so much, Shireen.
Thank you very much, Sanako. And I certainly have the sense that you will be the pioneers of changing a lot of the briefing patterns that you've spoken about. And it's in many ways, it's in some ways we are so privileged that we've come so far. As you say, we have now the first female Chief Justice, and our numbers are increasing, even though within the legal profession, only 23% of us, especially within the circles of attorneys and counsels, are in the leadership. So we've still got a long way to go in that respect. But at the same time, we've come far, as I said earlier. I want to quickly zoom over to Ms. Zodwa Velleman, and let's hear from your side before we get to the public protector and the NDPP in a few seconds, where you are in the private sector. And I know with all of your work as one of the founding members of the African Fellows Legal Network, what we find within leadership with Black people particularly is that there's still a leadership at 3.2%. And in fact, globally, for Black people, only 0.8%, even if you look at Fortune 500 companies of leadership, are women and or Black. So give us a perspective of some of your experiences, partly from the tone that Sanako has set up to say, here's what you've seen in the leadership, I mean, with women lawyers, both in the private sector, but also some of your work in terms of changing the face of the private sector and women taking on matters that are not just the stereotypical type of matters that we've been given. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, DDG, and indeed all protocol observed. Thank you for the opportunity. I was listening with absolute smile from ear to ear to see the young and upcoming lawyers, advocates, and certainly if that's what we are having in Advocate Landazwe, and more are like that, I kid you not, our profession is in absolute good hands. I could never do what she's just done, to get on stage and to be able to be so articulate. But I think what that shows, and some of the points I do want to cover, is that indeed, you know, lots of strides have been achieved over the years in promoting females and Black females in the roles of leadership. And I think the role that we have taken for granted is that we all always need to see somebody that looks like us, that looks like you, so that we're actually personally inspired and you believe that you too can do it. I know that for the longest I was inspired by Advocate Gumbi, who was the advisor to President Thabo Mbeki, and I thought that one day I'm going to be the President's Counsel. I never achieved that, but I continuously remained inspired by the Advocate. And I also know that even though she's not said anything yet, but the former minister, Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, came once to Parliament with her baby because she was summoned to actually come and do a presentation. And she started breastfeeding the child. Who would have thought of something like that? And I thought that that was so courageous. And that's how we should try to lead as women. We lead by creating these examples for even the younger ones to follow, because we had those stalwarts, those examples that we could follow. But more to the issue, I do want to say, DDG and everyone else that's on the platform, we have seen quite some rise in the private sector of the general counsels that are female, that are Black, that are taking up spaces. Whether you are thinking of L'Oreal, you are thinking of Unilever, Adidas, Tiger Brands, Vodacom, you will see people like begin to represent the demographics of the country. We also have a rise on females creating and establishing their own Black law firms. So like your DM5s, your Mapongwanes and others, I mean, they're there. You are not short of these law firms, but it does talk to some of the challenges that women are actually facing. And I think that Advocate Lindazwe also touched on them. And that is why in 2013, as the Vance Fellows working with Cyrus Vance of New York, we commissioned the initial study. It was not easy, but to just begin to test as to what exactly happening in our profession. And at the time, and particularly insofar as the growth and development of women in the roles of leadership. And at the time, we realized that it's about 5% of female leaders, Black in particular, that are occupying these positions. And then work had to be done. And I dare say that it's not because we do not have the policies, we do not have the legislation, we do not have the constitution that supports the work that needs to be done. The employment equities, the legislation is there, and we can pride ourselves that we've got solid legislation. And I think that maybe later on we need to really get on what needs to be done. What phase are we on right now to shift the dial forward? But in 2022, and the study was released now in February in 2024, we conducted another study, again using Plus 94 research for the credibility, supported by the New York Cyrus Vance Institute of the New York Bar Association, working again with the Legal Fellows Network in South Africa. We have seen the shift, but again, it is not as where we want it to be. The study was, in this instance, looking at the leadership position held by Black women in the legal profession, in public and public sectors. And we also went to investigate what affects women's progress in legal profession 30 years later. And I think that the Deputy Minister and the other speakers, they've touched on it. The narrative, the script is the same. There's discrimination, there's sexual harassment that is coming through, there's unconscious bias. I question how unconscious it is in this day and age with all the training and all the information that is out there and is available on how we all need to join hands and change the status quo. There are issues of motherhood that is still at issue even today. The fact that you're a woman, you want to create your own family, you want to start your own family, that continues to hold a woman back. And hence you have this discussion talking about prioritization. Do you want to climb the corporate ladder? Do you want to be a mother? Do you want to be a good mother? Those discussions are so old. So much has been done to make sure that we try and move forward. But again, those are the things that are coming through to say they're still true in this day and age. There are issues of briefing patterns. I mean, the issues are there and there are many. And I think that we know about them. There's no other study that is going to come and tell us anything that is new that, is not in the public domain. So again, between these two studies, and I'll be quite keen to also share it with people that are interested so that we can join hands and see what it is that can be done. But we are shifting the needle forward, but at a very slow pace. And what we're actually doing and what has actually come out is to realize that programs of mentorship is what is actually needed. And I think that maybe when we talk about solutions, those are some of the things that we need to be looking at. The programs of he for she, let's discuss them and say, what is the role of men who are occupying this position in assisting our young, up and coming, able female attorneys, advocates, practitioners in the legal field? The studies that are actually out there that are done on women show that in companies, even in legal practice, where you see women in leadership position, those companies tend to do well on all metrics that one can potentially think of. So there is science behind making sure that we support the growth and development and these women and all our women taking positions across the various sectors and indeed in the law firms, in the legal profession, because that is still very much underrepresented. Perhaps I just end and say that we do have some example. I don't want it to be a dooms and glooms here, but many of us will know of Lee Naidu, who's at Baker McKenzie. and she's the country manager of the firm. The programs that she's actually putting in there, they're actually worth emulating. So there's nobody that is actually expected to write their own new script. There's nothing that has been done. There's innovation that is required. We just need to make sure that we continue to dig in, get our hands dirty, and do the work, because we want to see more and more women occupy this position. Different to what it was in 2012 when I took on a legal role with as a general counsel for a multinational, to where it is now. But more needs to be done. Maybe I remain there through you, DDG, and then maybe later on we'll come on with some of the solution that we might wish to explore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if it was just from my side, but the connection seemed to have buffered a little bit, but we did hear the salient points that you raised. And as you spoke, I was just reminded of the comments that you and the previous speakers have made about some of the tools and the systems that we have in place. And with that, on that note of the tools and systems and how effective it may be, it seems opportune for me to go to the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Batoy. Thank you so much for joining us, and maybe ask you what do you see, not just as a female lawyer over your career, but in the mammoth task that you have, how effective are these systems that we currently have and these tools that we've spoken about, and what are some of your suggestions for us going forward, and also towards these dialogues as to whether it's even helpful to have these, and are we still having the same conversation of diagnosing the issues? What are some of your thoughts in that regard? Over to you, NDPP.
Thank you very much to the chair. And let me say to Zodwa, I love your outfit. At least my color matches, as opposed to the black suit that I'm wearing is really boring. I think I need to get you as my advisor. It's really stunning. And I do want to say also to Zodwa, sorry, to Sanako, I mean, that was a really, it's incredible the work that you're doing. And I concur with Zodwa, who said, I think we have women like this, young lawyers that are coming up. I think gives us a lot of hope for the future in terms of what we can achieve as women. I think maybe I should first also say that I'm really pleased to hear that there's now a minimum wage for candidate attorneys. When I started, when I was a candidate attorney in 1985, it was, I got paid 100 rands a month, which was comparatively, yes, it's still not bad, but it was really not much money then. But that's a really significant, and it's crazy that, what are we now, 25 years later or so, we finally get, this minimum wage. I think that's a really good improvement. But I also want to just, mention that our speakers, some of our speakers have mentioned women being given opportunities to do things. And, this is where I am so grateful for the opportunity that I was given by men, actually, at a time when I didn't myself think that I was possibly ready to move the next step in my career. And so, the two men that give me opportunities is Bulelani Muka, that was the first National Director of Public Prosecutions, and Percy Son, who's sadly late, who was the head of the Scorpions way back in when was it, in 2000, late 90s, and men that really supported me. I remember when Bulelani first offered the position of DPP to me way back in 2000, Director of Public Prosecutions in KwaZulu-Natal. I was then the head of Scorpions, and I said no. I said to him, I don't think I have enough experience. And Percy Son was there, and he was the head of Scorpions. And he said, Shamila, I've worked with you for 2 years, and I know you can do this. And this was way back in 2000. And having the support, because then there weren't really women role models that I could turn to, even in the organization, to support. So the support of men to help women. I mean, now I am holding the position of National Director myself. But it's critical that men actually support women as much as those of us now that have broken through the glass ceiling need to actually support women. So, I mean, there's a lot we're trying to do in the NPA. I'm not going to go into those details. We do have majority women in senior management. We have a number of directors of public prosecutions. I think of the 10, 6 of them are women, very powerful positions. I've got a really nice picture here on my wall of all the senior women in the NPA, and it's really quite a powerful picture. And I think I often say, men mess up and then they get women to come and clean up. I think that's how I feel sometimes in the NPA. But I think, just talking about, some of the laws and the legal frameworks, I'm not going to bore you with the details, just simply to say, I agree with other women on this platform. Our country has incredibly powerful laws and policies. Well, policies, maybe I think we can still talk a little bit about, but certainly laws. And, the women empowerment initiatives, there are a number of them. But when you compare that to the lived realities of the majority of women in our country, I think there's a huge disconnect. And both in terms of, economic subjugation of women, and it is so that if you empower women, you empower family, you empower nations. And women in the informal sector in particular, it's hugely important to encourage this as they move towards getting into the formal sector. But dealing with economic empowerment, the other issue in the NPA that we deal with that affect women is the issue of maintenance. I know the Department of Justice, deals with this issue, and there's a lot of initiatives, but this is another huge problem for women in this country where men do not pay maintenance. And the sad reality is we're dealing with a lot of child pregnancies, and that's another issue to be dealt with that really destroyed the lives of our girls in this country. So I think from the perspective of legislation and trying to really better the lives of women, we have to look at ourselves as institutions in terms of how do we ensure that the environments that we work in are more conducive to women moving ahead in a particular environment. And it requires us to deal with so many aspects of our work through what is a gender perspective lens. And so, we talk about these things and, what is what is the lens through which, we got to look at these issues. And so, I was in my previous life at the International Criminal Court, we worked on developing a policy, sexual and gender-based crimes policy, which has been reviewed by the new prosecutor recently. And it talked about what exactly is a gender perspective. And it's a lens that we got to look through when we're recruiting, when we are dealing with briefing patterns, etc. How do we make sure, what do we need to do to get this? And what is this lens? And a gender perspective, and I'm quoting from the policy, it really refers to an understanding of the differences in status, power, roles, and needs between men and women, and including LGBTQI plus persons, and how gender inequalities and discrimination on the basis of sex or gender identities, orientations, it affects people's opportunities. It affects their ability to interact, their experiences in a particular context. And so when we are developing policies, we've got to understand how all of these, through the gender perspective lens, how all of these issues impact on people's opportunities. And I think maybe in South Africa, I know our Department of Women and Persons with Disabilities had been dealing with this, but we need a proper gender analysis, and, so that we can understand, when you do this analysis, it asks questions like, what has happened, against whom, by whom, why, what are the intersecting factors, how does it affect people's opportunities, and how does it exacerbate vulnerabilities? And when we understand that, then we can put in place policies that speak to these issues. And I think perhaps that is something that we need to be doing more on as a country. You know, we've really been trying to deal with these issues in the NPA, but I think as government, one of the issues that we need to, as leaders, also think about, and you know, the DM is on this webinar, is to how do we actually seriously think about gender-based budgeting? You know, we have all of these policies and we want to do all of these things. You know, looking at now, for example, you know, dealing with bringing women up, how do you plan for the future? But do we actually budget with a gender perspective, with that lens? And if we don't do proper gender-based budgeting, I think we're going to still struggle with this. So I'm going to leave it at this. I can still talk about lots of stuff we're dealing with regard to crimes against women, you know, because, yeah, there's lots said about that. But in the interest of time, you know, if it comes up in the discussion, I'm happy to talk about many other things. But I'll just leave it at that for now, if it's okay with the chair.
Thank you so much, NDPP. I think you really touched with the recommendations. You've touched the point there, which is we need to have 30 years later, a comprehensive gender analysis, which is cross-cutting, because you and other speakers have picked on more than once on not just the intersectionality, but also the multidimensionality of poverty and how it affects women. So there's certainly food for thought in that. Maybe it's something we look at, and in terms of what are the benchmarks, which is what we're hoping to come out from today's discussion. What are the benchmarks, so that in the next 5 years we can then review how far we've come, because as we said earlier, we've diagnosed the issues, but we need now some more rigorous data to see where things currently are. I think as you say that, and we'll certainly come back to you, because we'd love to hear some of the challenges with implementation in terms of gender-based violence, and also how the criminal justice system is affecting women. Allow us to now go to our public protector, who is also another key player within the system in terms of the tools that we have in the systems, and how is that currently, how are we responding to the issues? What are the types of complaints that come from you? And also, you're one of those women lawyers, and that's showing us the power of the panel and women in the leadership positions, not just in government, but also in the private sector. What are some of the challenges you may have faced as a women lawyer coming up through the ranks? And you are one of our youngest public protectors, and we're very proud of that and the work that you're doing. But also just give us some insights of what the conversations are within the Public Protector's Office in terms of us advancing the rights of women. Over to you, Public Protector, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, facilitator of the session. Greetings according to all protocol that has already been established. I mean, it's a very interesting topic, and having listened to the other panelists, it's very clear that in South Africa, we've made some great strides, but you can't look at South Africa in isolation. We need to look at ourselves, you know, in line with where the world is. We've set a world record in South Africa with the most progressive constitution, as well as with laws and policies, you know, surrounding gender emancipation. And if you look at, for instance, the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, which clearly sets out that women's equal participation and leadership in political and public life are essential in achieving same. Now, if you look at our country, particularly these elections that have just passed, we have regressed. Firstly, in terms of political representation of women, there are lesser women in parliament. So as the climate changes in the world, women get affected. I mean, Advocate Batoy say, when the men mess up, the women must come and clean up. And I mean, looking at this, it is quite disturbing for us as a country, because for us to progress as women, we need to have the political voice, we need to have the political leadership, and we need to hold that. Further, the data collected by the UN Women in the World Economic Forum show that women are underrepresented at all levels of decision making. Yes, we've made the strides, but we are still underrepresented. Advocate Batoy also spoke to the issue of gender-based budgeting. Look at appropriations in Parliament. Who is the chair of the Appropriations Committee? It is a man. Who is the Minister of Finance? It is a man. Now, when you look into these forms of budgeting, the budget of the Gender Commission, for instance, it shows you, where the thinking is. The budget of the Department of Women, Children, and Persons with disabilities, that is supposed to be the oversight department that is able to advise
Madam Public Protector, we seem to have lost you. We're all failing to hear you, and your picture's frozen. Let's allow her to reconnect. And in the meanwhile, I will then go over to our other speaker, Ms. Parvell Matthews, who also is quite a champion, especially in mentoring young women lawyers, but also taken on many projects, especially in the area of socioeconomic rights, given the kind of work that she does as ABSA. And some of you may know that Ms. Matthews is one of the first female Black women working in banking derivatives in the country. Ms. Matthews, you would have heard that quite a few, and I think this is a reality in our country when it comes to socioeconomic rights and the fact that women remain the greatest of caregivers and take on far more responsibility than our male counterparts, unfortunately. And it really is, in spite of the provisions that we have on socioeconomic rights in the Constitution, the systems haven't come up to provide the kind of support that we need with respect to not just socioeconomic rights, but our own standing as well. If we look at our male counterparts, even in our professional capacities, they almost always tend to earn a bit more than women do. I think the government is probably one of the few environments where there is that gender neutrality in terms of the packages that you earn, even though we may not be as many senior women leaders in government. So over to you for your insights, and thank you too for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think I should start, Shireen, by just saying that in as much as I am an advocate in the sense that you've described, I'm certainly not an advocate in the technical sense. I'm an attorney looking after derivatives for Absa Bank Group. And then I also serve as the CIB, so that's the Corporate Investment Banking Chairperson of the Employment Equity Forum. And I sit on the Absa Women's Forum looking after the pay parity work stream. So these things are really, really close to my heart. I think what we find here is that, and it's been deliberated and discussed, I don't even think that there's really anything further to add to it, is that from a reg and sort of policy perspective, everything, or at least the bulk of it, is in place. So we know that that's not really where we're being let down. I think we need to discuss the will of organizations and persons and those with the power to actually effect the change, right? And I think that's where we start to take ownership. Certainly from an ABSA perspective, it's taking ownership and saying, look, we can't manage what we don't measure. And so we did the work internally to have a look at exactly what our current dynamics are. And then the women in ABSA took it upon themselves to go and present to the board. I happen to be one of the presenters, as well as to our AGIL EXCO. So that's the EXCO that runs ABSA, what the priorities are for women. So I think you need to be able to identify what the issues are, and then you need to navigate where you think you need to work towards in order to get to where you want to be. And so from that perspective, the ABSA women presented, and these are solutions that I think we need to be thinking about and discussing, and obviously the enhancement and obviously progress and fast tracking these is critical. But, you know, we looked at 3 core priorities from an Absa Women's perspective in order to try and really, really see the progress that we want to see in this arena. Financial inclusion was one of them. And in that, we looked at pay parity. And then we also looked at investing in women and women's education and development. And then the second one is diversity and inclusion. A lot of the panelists already spoke to some of the things. The allyship piece is a massive one for us. Last year, November, we launched the Absa Men's Forum, which really, really has taken off and is doing amazing work. And that also looks at obviously leadership, but also it looks at male, the male elements and male issues that they need to look out for in order to present as better men supporting the women agenda. So masculine toxicity is also one of the things that they do, they do deal with. And then we look at the appointment of women in senior roles and in decision-making roles. That is absolutely critical. It has been spoken to. If you don't have a seat at the table, if you can't influence, if you don't have mandate, then really your hands are tied. And Absa is cognizant of this. And so we've really driven an agenda around that and looking at how we use our hiring and promotion principles in order to effect the change that we want to see. And then we've also got gender-friendly policies that's also been spoken to here. We have our sexual harassment policy that we've just done a review on, and we continue to look at our policies to see how we can enhance them in order to actually give effect to our deep agenda. Then the last one is the just agenda, and that one looks at championing all our initiatives that are around anti-GBV, harassment, and domestic violence. So those are the main things, but we also are quite clear that those things don't sit in isolation. So whilst those form the priorities, we've got enablers and we've identified 4. One that was spoken about is the unconscious bias enabler, right? And that speaks to building psychological safety in an environment, as well as breaking biases is very, very important. I think Zodwa spoke to the fact that, at this day and at this stage, how unconscious is this bias? But it does actually play out. We see it play out in our organization. And I think ours is to really help colleagues, to be more aware about it, to conscientize themselves to the impact that they have in terms of the effect on others, and trying to just get people to understand that this is a real issue that does have an effect on women and women's progression and rights. We then look at monitoring and holding our accountable executives accountable. I mean, that speaks for itself, right? That is regular engagements with the persons that are actually looking after the development of women and the development and enhancement of the agenda right across the board, having those conversations, looking at the stats and engaging. So that's quite critical. We then look at communication, and I think this is a big one. We tend to, when we talk about this, it does tend to be reflecting in a negative sense, but there's a lot of progress, and I think some of it has been spoken to. But what we don't do well, and what we certainly have identified as an organization that we don't do well enough, is celebrating our successes. So I think that there's a lot to be said. Absa has been in the Forbes, received the Forbes Award as well as the Brandon Hall Award. The Brandon Hall had to do with the empowerment of women under a program called Ignite. And then obviously from a Forbes perspective, I think it was twice in a row that we were sort of in the top 40 it was. And at some point, the only African organization that was actually on that. So the work that we're doing is being recognized by others. And I think we need to do a better job of actually celebrating, our own achievements. And then finally, it's just about the fact that there needs to be adequate access to data. And I think that came through Zodwa in the Vance survey as well, right? If you don't have data, if you don't have access to knowledge, then there's only so much you can do. So that's sort of where we are as Absa, and we're really, really proud about the steps that we're making. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. Are we making strides? Yes, we are. And I think to Zodwa's point, it's now about, we speak a lot about we're on a journey, which is great. But now we need to think about what mode of transport are we using on this journey, and we need to start accelerating that pace in order to get where we want to be. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matthews. And I think you've touched on something that we are constantly faced with, not just unconscious gender bias, but unconscious race and gender bias that we face on a daily basis. Perhaps we'll come back to these points a little later. We're now, and thank you for your inputs. We're now going to go back to the public protector who was experiencing load shedding as this happened. So there's another point that we might have to convene on at a later date, different reasons. So back to you, Madam Public Protector.
Thank you so much. Yes, I was experiencing load reduction again. We are here because of some of the challenges caused by men in this country. But be as it may, I was making reflections on the issues of budgeting and saying where we are and how important it is in respect of when we conducted this investigation into gender-based violence. Part of the responses of the Department of Justice was that there's no money to implement the remedial actions. And these are critical systemic reforms which are required in order to transform our justice system in order for it to effectively respond to challenges of gender-based violence. And we know that any form of violence against women, whether in the workplace, at home, in society at large, it does hinder their economic participation. For as long as the issue of budgeting is really not gender-based and not gender issues being prioritized in respect of budgeting itself, in order to give effect to our constitution, to these laws and very progressive policies that we have in respect of gender equality, then we would really take our lifetime to see so, as already been estimated by the World Economic Forum, which states that it will take us 145.5 years to attain gender parity in politics. And really that is a critical issue, because which basically means that not in our lifetime and not in the lifetime of the next generation will we actually be able to attain gender parity. Now, the issues that we have further been able to identify in line with our investigations is that we still have the elephant in the room of the rural woman, of the illiterate woman, not even having access to services, now let alone access to opportunities which are basically available. We are in the fourth industrial revolution phase as a country, and there are women and a high percentage of women which is basically left behind. There's the issue of child pregnancy. Now, the amount is increasing year in and year out, which basically says to us there is something that we are not doing right as a nation in the protection of our girl children. Now, if we have about 400 per year girl children who fall through the cracks by falling pregnant, who must find themselves having to adult at such a young age, what does it mean for the future of our country when it comes to issues of gender parity? Yes, we have attained a lot as a country. The chairperson of the Gender Commission really touched on the laws, which are very progressive, I must say, and we are ranking high in the world. We are number 18 in terms of the progressiveness that we are as a nation. But again, attaining gender parity is also a mindset. We come from colonialization as a country, from apartheid as a country, where men are seen supreme. Even currently, patriarchy still reigns supreme. And what is it to the mindset, not only of the men, but also of the mindset of us as women? Advocate Batoyi touched on being given opportunities by men. In the legal profession, all of us who are actually in leadership positions now, for us to have attained where we are, we were given opportunities by men. And correctly so, because men are the ones who were in the position to be able to lift us up. Other than that, we would not have had those opportunities because there were no women who were holding these positions. But the stereotype that then causes into society in respect of that, because it then had to be that we had to align ourselves to a point that we had to be affirmed as women so that we can help those who come after us. And really, I hope that we are taking up this baton as had been previously been taken up by the likes of the first female justice minister in our country, Umama Bridget Mabandla, who made it her business to implement policies, but to follow up on the implementation of those policies to make sure that females are being appointed to the positions of authority, and particularly in the judiciary. We see now we are going to have the first female Chief Justice because of the strides that were taken by Umama Babandla, so that we do not have a next generation of women that will end up being abused by us because we were in a position where we had no choice, but we had to be affirmed by men. And the abuse is also a societal abuse because of the stereotype that brings up on. As the public protector, I am pleased to say that we've got a CEO who is a woman, a COO who's a woman, and many executives who are a woman. Basically, 68% of the executive at the public protector are actually women. But the challenges that this brings is that we still have the glass ceiling. We still have the glass ceiling where when a woman enters a boardroom, it is still not sufficient. We firstly have the societal barriers that we carry as women, not just the gender-based violence, but the stereotype of our society, which we grow up with. And look at Batoyi touched on the suit, on the black suit that she's wearing. As women, we are not raised like that. We are not raised with dark colors. We are raised with yellow, pinks, whites, and all kind of beautiful, bright colors. But the moment you enter into that boardroom, it is a black and a navy. The legal profession is black. The economic and finance profession is navy. Because those were stipulations by men of what power is and what power relations is. Now, we need to change that. And that is really the struggle that we are facing, is to change the face of power, is to change the color of power, because that is very important on how women adapt with the opportunities that they are being given. The opportunity alone is not enough. Adaptability is critical, that once you're given that opportunity, how do you vary in respect of ensuring that you excel? Unfortunately, we are still in a phase where women have to do 4 times more than the men to be regarded as excelling. Very little have I heard of anyone speaking of what competency do they have when a man is going to be appointed into a position. And when it is a woman, that is very quick to be asked, what is their experience? What is the competency? What have they been exposed to? So those are still the barriers which we face as women. For instance, I am happy to see that the world is moving towards compassionate leadership, which actually means that the world is slowly starting to accept female leadership, because leadership was characterized and continue to be characterized by masculinity. How deep is the voice? How tall you are? How bold can you speak? But now we are speaking of compassionate leadership, which we need to embrace, because what that means is that it is accepting and inculcating female leadership, because females are compassionate by nature. We are nurturers. We are bearers of life by nature. And therefore, our leadership will never be the same as that of men because of our stature and how we are built and made out to be as women leaders. And I think as a country, particularly the appointment of Justice Maya is a huge milestone, firstly because the judiciary is an arm of state. So we will have the legislature and the judiciary, which are arms of state, being led by women, and hopefully, really in the near future, we will also have an executive that is led by women, because the politics need to change for the economics and the social factors to change, because it is the politics and those who are in political power who've got the broader impact to be able to change these kind of dynamics which women face. Now, in conclusion, just allow me to state a critical quote by the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, which states that women in the criminal justice system can act as agents of change and contribute to greater accountability. Women judges particularly bring different perspective and experiences to strengthening judicial system. Women in leadership roles help disrupt networks of collusion, striking a blow against corruption. Because again, corruption is another factor that is taking us back as women. The money that is being wasted and being taken even out of the country could actually be the money that assists to boost our fiscus to be able to budget for issues which are for the upliftment of women. And women's representation in law enforcement and judicial institution has been linked to more effective victim-centered responses to crime, which we know is a huge hindrance for women. Where a woman does not feel safe, they are unable to strive. So as we come to an end of this month, which is to celebrate the strides of women since the brave march in the Union buildings in 1956, I really call upon us women, particularly as women of our country, to actually revive the Women's Charter of 1954, in which women actually said equal respect for women, the right to dignity for women and other women rights. So human rights is not human rights without the women's rights. And in fact, even before the Freedom Charter, it is the woman who stood up and said that we are being oppressed and it is the women's rights that we need to stand up for. But we need to create systems which make it conducive for these rights to be implemented. But as well, those women who are in positions of authority. And these need not be positions of power, any position where you are able to assist and make a difference in somebody's life. I really call upon us to really take up the call of Mama Charlotte Maxeke, which she made back in 1909, where she says that she wants to come back to her country to minister for the betterment of the lives of her people, but particularly for the lives of the women, because when you change the life of a woman, you are changing the life of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Ngaleka. Your sense of passion and your beliefs have come through very strongly. I think you very clearly articulated not just what we need to celebrate, but some of the very many challenges that we face. And I think a very significant point also comes through is your sense of consciousness and how we as women can support each other and also uplift those around us, including the dynamics that really need to be changed. Several themes are coming through, and Madam Public Protector, we'll come back to you on one or two more questions and comments. But in the meanwhile, I want to also ask all of those online. I know you're muted and some of you wanting to put up your hands. We're going to take your questions through the chat, so please send them through fast and furious, because we're going to go a second round to all of our panelists and they're going to do their closing comments so that we can finish timeously. So keep those questions coming in. A few themes have emerged from today's discussion. The one is the rights-based approach, especially with the aspects of accountability and gender-based budgets. And, you know, in South Africa, we have, and I think, Madam Public Protector, you've raised this, let's look at where we are internationally. We are leading in terms of having rights-based legislation in our country. It's, of course, the implementation of that, and that's probably where we need to put some more efforts into it and question what kind of budgets we have. And that leads me to the second theme, which is how much have we invested, and that's what the NDPP and others have raised. How much have we invested to change these societal dynamics, and what does the the changing of the how much does it cost us to manage change, because we've got to have a mindset, and we're seeing this not just through gender but also through race. How much does it cost for our mindsets to change? And in as much as this comes through in the homes, but we also have to see this change in our professional environments. The third theme that's coming through is also that it doesn't matter which sector we are in this country. As we reflect and perhaps look at that gender intensive survey or analysis that we need, it's women in the rural sector, women in the informal sector, as well as those of us who are in the professional sector. We all face different challenges, but nonetheless, there's still many hurdles that we have to endure for us to reach that gender parity. As I will come up with a few more themes as the conversation continues, but one of the questions that has come through is to Advocate Senako. If you will come back online to answer the following question, and this question comes from Magongwane Scott. Who asks Advocate Senako, do you believe our policies alone are enough to champion the change we want to see? If not, what are some of the tools you believe we must use alongside our policies to achieve equality for women in the profession and to change the statistics in our favor? And there have been some brilliant statistics that have come through today, so I hope you caught some of them. So over to you, Advocate Senako. And as you respond, if there are any comments or responses you want to make to what our other panelists have said, because this is your last round to come on, please use this opportunity. And if you could confine all of this in just 5 minutes or less, that would be great. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Shireen, and thank you so much for the question. I think the answer to this is the policies are made by people and they're also enforced by people. And in order for us to see change and to see these policies come to life, people that are behind them, people that are driving them have to be intentional. You have to be intentional about actually using those policies that are given to you as tools towards seeing tangible difference and change in society. I mean, we can have as many dialogues as possible. We can speak to these issues as much as we want, but the people that are drivers, the people that are in power, the people that can make a meaningful difference, we call upon them to actually use these policies only as a guide, but their work should always speak for itself. For example, in the legal fraternity, there's been these policies for years and years, but it took someone who's in the position at the LPC, having changed its face, to say, actually, this no longer works. I'm in power right now, and be as it may be that my decisions right now are not going to be seen as popular, maybe there's going to be controversy because I'm making these decisions that will rival everyone. They have to be made, and I'm sticking to them, and I'm being intentional about using my turn right now at the LPC to make that meaningful difference. So all in all, it takes all of us who are here, who are sitting in these powerful positions, where we are, to realize that activism and taking the power and using it responsibly towards the change is the only thing that will ensure that we see a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I must apologize on behalf of everyone who runs networks and issues of connectivity and electricity, because some of us have been buffering and coming in and out. So we had to switch going to different panelists from the original just to make up the time. So one of our speakers, and thank you for that, Advocate Senako. I just wanted to get the audience to appreciate that we were just buffering on our side here. We'll in the span of the rest of the dialogue, I will pick up one or two of your points as we go to the other speakers. A speaker that we now call on is Ms. Nomaswazi Shabangu Ndawe, who is the president of the South African Women's Lawyers Association, and she's been a pioneer and a champion for women lawyers in the country, and has spent a lot of time, as you heard in the summary of her biography, spent a lot of time supporting women lawyers, advancing the issues, and with what you have heard so far, Ms. Nomaswazi, would you give us some of your experiences and your thoughts, and if you could also reflect on the conversation so far, and what would you say is where some areas that we need to now accelerate, as Ms. Matthews has raised earlier. We've done well, but we've got to now accelerate and fast track ourselves into some of the strategies that have to change so that the dynamic in the country is different in the next 5 years. Over to you, Ms. Shabangu, and unfortunately, because of network challenges, she is not going to switch on her camera, but she is audible. So over to you.
Thank you, Shireen. And is it still a morning? Good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity that you have given us. And as Shireen has already indicated, that I won't be able to open my camera because of my network. It's very unstable. And I am hoping that I'm audible enough to everyone. Yeah, we are celebrating 68 years of strong women marching to the Union Building. We are celebrating 101 years since women lawyers were recognized as persons. We are celebrating 57 years since Black women were able to be legal practitioners. And we are celebrating 30 years of our democracy. Then the question is, where are we in the legal profession? Are we where these women wanted us to be? We have laws on women empowerment and gender equality. But are those laws being implemented properly so that women can get that equality? A study has been made by the UCT, University of Cape Town, where it was found that women are perpetually marginalized in the legal profession. Women are still not there. They are still not holding high positions where they are supposed to be. The researcher, Dr. Tamlin Meyer from the University of Cape Town, has revealed that women are perpetually marginalized in the law profession. This study, which was done in March 2024, also showed that there is lack of women in the senior ranks of the profession, despite a robust legal and policy framework promoting equality. We have many women law graduates who are not getting an opportunity to enter the profession. We also have many women entering the profession, but they are not seen in senior positions in the law firms. This is evident to everyone. When you follow court proceedings in the ConCourt, you hardly see a woman advocate representing the state or representing big companies. When you follow the SCA's proceedings as well, you don't see women lawyers, while we have so many capable advocates who can be able to present or to represent the state. But then the question is, why the state is not briefing those women? We are still encountering skewed brief patterns where men are are the ones who are recognized than women. When we look in the judiciary, we have only 4 women who are heads of court. It is only on Monday when we are going to have 5 women, when our Chief Justice, our new Chief Justice, will be taking her office. We've got the Chief Justice, who is a woman. We have the JP of the Land Court, who is also a woman. We have the JP of KZN, the JP of Mpumalanga, and the president of the SCA. Then you ask yourself, how many courts are we having? How many high courts are we having when we have only 5 women who are heads of court in South Africa? Is these laws on women empowerment and gender equality being implemented? Is there a will from our government and the private sector to promote women or to implement the laws that is there to be implemented? We have, SAULA is participating in the legal sector code, which we believe that it will somehow assist in promoting women lawyers in the profession. Again, that legal sector code is being frustrated by, I don't know who. I don't even want to say by men who are holding positions there. Who are the people who are supposed to make sure that this legal sector code come into action so that women can see themselves being given proper work that is being given to the men. We have a number of laws meant to protect women. We have your Domestic Violence Amendment Act. But even having those laws, our women out there, they still die having those orders in their hands. We have gender-based violence, which is very rife in South Africa. Is there any will to deal with those perpetrators who are committing that? We have sexual harassment in the legal profession. We have seen in media, sexual harassment in judicial, sexual harassment in the law firm. But what is painful is that the focus is only on the judiciary and we forget about the law firms where everything starts. We forget about the bars where everything starts. SAULA has embarked now in trying to deal with the sexual harassment in the legal profession. We are starting to do our research, our study as to how many of our young women are facing this sexual harassment from their principals. And they are also afraid to come out because they will lose their articleships or their pupillage because those people, they are depending on them. The public protector spoke about access to justice, which resonate very much to SAULA. Access to justice is a foreign language to women in the rural areas. SAULA is on the ground dealing with those issues, but the challenge is the resources. The program director also spoke about the resources, that we are lacking resources to deal with those issues. I think if we can just give ourselves some time and do a soul searching to say, why are we coming up with so many laws, good laws for that matter, but there's a lack of implementation? I think we need a will from the men who are occupying those senior positions. Zodwa has asked a question to say, we need to ask those women who are holding high positions or who are occupying high positions as to what is it that they are doing. Are they doing enough to have gender equality, or gender equality to them is just one of those ticking boxes? There's a lot that we can talk about when coming to women empowerment, and the lack of willingness from the state and to all the men who are occupying senior positions. The state continues to brief only male. They're talking about gender equality. We have gone so far. We have done this. But where are women? Can we have that statistics that the state attorney is talking about, to say they are briefing women? Yes, they are briefing women, but on what? On what? Women are tired of doing cases against the Minister of Police. They want cases that involves mining. They want to deal with cases that involve critical and difficult cases that they want to embark on so that they can improve themselves. We are talking of appointing judges on the bench. Yes, we are appointing judges on the bench. Then thereafter, there's criticism to say women judges are not doing well. It's surprising that you are seeing that when they are already there, because you need to start from the ground. Give them work that they can work on so that when they are elevated to judges, they are able to preside on those cases that are coming before them. You cannot expect a judge to only come for the first time or come into contact for the first time with a case that deals with mining, while she has not dealt with it while she was still an attorney or an advocate. And only those people who can assist those judges to be good judges, to preside in any cases, is when attorneys and advocates are being given those work to work on while they are still attorneys and advocates. There's a lot that we can say as Saula that we see it's not, there is no will on it from our male counterparts. But due to time constraint, Chairperson, I'll end there. I'll come back in the second round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know about others, but it was a little challenging to hear you because it kept buffering, but I think we did get the gist of what you were saying. And I want to add to those very important points that you raised in reference to a survey that the Vance Center, together with the African Legal Fellows Network and the Women in the Workplace, which is the first chapter in South Africa that provides mentorship to women lawyers entering the profession, supported by the senior women lawyers in South Africa. It's the first that we have. And yourself, Ms. Nomaswazi, Ms. Kwenaina, Ms. Matthews, and Ms. Zodwa have all been part of this project. But that survey spoke to the situation of women lawyers in the profession that said 68% of respondents incurred discrimination in the workplace. That was both on race and gender. 31% experienced sexual harassment, and 18% of women in the workplace have been asked for sexual favors. And an overall point that the public protector raised earlier was that the power dynamics remain disproportionate. And having then mentioned the public protector, there is a question in the Q&A that has come up, which I'm going to pull up in a second to you, Madam Public Protector. And if you could use the opportunity to reflect on any have any responses to what other panelists may have said, and also do some closing remarks. The question I have is to the Public Protector. I'm reading it from the screen. What are some of the measures we must take in the spaces to break those glass ceilings? And how do we pick the necessary battles to engage in to avoid swimming against the tides, even where the impact might not be long-standing? Madam Public Protector, over to you.
Thank you. I think it's unavoidable, really. I'll switch on my video because of the bandwidth. I think it's unavoidable, really. I'll just take up the latter question to swim against the tides. I mean, when our forebears fought against apartheid, they were definitely swimming against the tides. And even now, the battle that we have against corruption, we are swimming against the tides. So it is really to put on that courage and stand up for what is right and do what is right, that we really need to do. But to mobilize, we need to mobilize. It's really not a battle that can be fought by one person or one sector. It really needs society in its entirety, but it needs women to swell the ranks, the critical ranks, leadership roles across the sector, and be intentional about the change that is required. We have the laws on our side, as we have heard. And that ties up really what measures we need to take in breaking the glass ceiling. I think we need to be intentional about where does the money go to? How much is allocated to what, and what difference must it make in order to ensure full women emancipation? I'm really worried about the estimates that are given by the IMF in respect of us reaching gender parity. But we need to do more so that at least we halve that. We ensure that the generation that comes after at least find things much more progressed. And yes, we really can't blame the past much. The doors have been opened for us, but the patriarchy has so been embedded and entrenched within society that it is not an easy state of affairs to totally eradicate, but we need to move on and even faster on the role in which we are in. I just really want to make a comment on what the president of SALA has raised. It is a critical point, and I'm really happy that SALA is looking into this. And those who are going to be affected the most, even in the new reforms of the minimum wage, is going to be the young female lawyers, and particularly Black females, because most of the Black firms that take them up do not have the resources to pay that minimum wage. So what is going to happen is that they are going to be jobless, and what is going to happen to that? So maybe SALA really and other legal organization must ensure that the implementation of this is taken up, and that there is capacity given, particularly to law firms where are female owned, so that they are able to capacitate other female lawyers who are coming up. Otherwise, the abuse is going to be more than what is intended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Public Protector. I think the strongest point, you've made some great points, but the strongest one that you've emphasized is societal dynamics, the change and changing the mindset. And it certainly is now where having had good laws and good policies in place, even though in some areas we still need to improve on those, where we need to put emphasis on. So thank you so much for your participation today. I think you've really been inspiring, and many of those who are online, and I think our numbers have now gone up to around 160 that are joining on this platform, have commented on your inspiration. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to go to Ms. Zodwa Velleman to number one. Make your closing remarks and also any reflections or responses to the comments made by the other panelists. And then would you also, as someone who has been one of the founders of the Vance chapter in South Africa, would you just also make a short reference to a question that has come up from the participants with respect to the Vance survey? Over to you, Ms. Velleman.
Thank you very much once more for the opportunity. I think maybe let me just chat a little bit about Vance and the South African Legal Fellows. So what happened with with our democracy? There were various programs that were put in place to support Black commercial practitioners, to leapfrog them in the profession, to gain more experience in deals and matters that they would ordinarily not be exposed to. So some of you might have seen, like in Direbus, that's where they used to advertise. I mean, that was like long ago, 2005, when I looked at it, and we then applied, and it would be, candidates taken across the country in each province, and depending on the spots that they were able to secure, and would be placed in these international top law firms. So in 2005, 2006, I was placed in New York. I worked at Weil Gotshal and Manges, and it was one of the top 3 biggest international law firms. And I was there, and I practiced in M&A, and I did commercial law. And the idea was that once the program is done, you need to be able to come back and be able to plow back into the profession, into the community. And we did indeed, come back. There's like about almost 60 of us that went into this program over the various years. I know some of you would know Ubonakele, who is the commissioner or former commissioner for competition, or competition commissioner. And, there are many, many others without really dropping names, but people have come back and they've really taken this to heart, and they've done, very well. And really, most of us, we know that, we have been able to ascend and lead as general counsels in these top international law firms because of some of the exposure that we had and the mentorship and the sponsorship that we received. So we then came back, and one of the other initiatives that we started as women in this program was to actually start the mentorship program, and said one of the critical elements that is needed for the growth and development of female lawyers is the mentorship. Somebody that has an interest in, making sure that they share their learnings, they open the pathway for you. How do we actually begin to contribute in a meaningful manner to this? So working with Cyrus Vance, which is a center in New York under the New York Bar, and indeed these fellows that I've now mentioned, we managed to get sponsorship from the US Embassy. And we were able to then start the mentorship program, where we partner the seasoned lawyers, whether your partners, your general counsels, some advocates, we had some judges as well, with some of the up-and-coming lawyers. We advertise, and there's a whole support behind it. We've got Dr. Kim, who actually manages the program on our behalf. We've got Ada Yobi that is sitting in New York that makes sure that, we are able to continue to develop the program. And then we've got Nontu, who is the chairperson. I just tend to be the runner in between. But we were able now to have the program over the last 2 years. It's actually on its 3rd year. And again, with sponsorship, you tend to find that you are able to get a commitment for 2 years. And, going forward, so what are we going to do? So we've had some fellows, they dig into their pockets and say, it's such a meaningful program. We want to continue. So it's actually on its 3rd year. And to date, I think that we can say we've been able to touch in a meaningful way lives of about, let's say, 125 women through this mentorship program. We've seen some of them, joining some of the corporates because they work with these general councils, some of them being able to actually diversify and focus on areas that they would ordinarily not be, able to look into. And again, we look at commercial law, antitrust, we look at tax, maritime, and we try to look at a little bit more of the fields that would ordinarily not be open to many of us as Black practitioners, Black female, because they're only in your big top law firms. So that has been such a wonderful program. And part of it is, I know that PAV was also a staunch member and supporter of the program as a mentor, and quite frankly, one of the engines in the room, and she's one of us panelists here. We've looked at how do we make sure that, we've got data that we work with? Because one thing we all know, you don't want to stand on platforms and say that, there's 5% of women or Black women in the profession. You do not have the data that supports it. There is no credibility in that. So over the period, we've been able to do some of this research. Is it enough? No. Do we have the money to conduct more? We wish, but we do not. And that's why I think that, for us to be able to continue to do this work, there are one or two things that I would like to actually just highlight that I perhaps think that might assist in kicking the needle forward instead, of this tortoise pace that we've actually been moving on, albeit, the recognition that there has been some strides that have been achieved. So I do think that perhaps we do need something of a advisory panel within the department that is really focused and working with all the departments. We've got the gender commissions and so on. They all have a role to play, but something that might be able to reside in the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. And you look as to what it is, where are we? Start with the researches that we need. What are the numbers that we are dealing with? Let's have research, because it's important to have fact-based discussions. Otherwise, you miss all of it. We do need that gender budget. All of a sudden, I'm thinking like, don't we have it? I actually thought that it's a given. By now, if you are serious about doing something, changing something, you put a budget behind it. If you want a house, you save towards a house. If you want to change the narrative, the challenges that are out there, you put a budget towards it. It's the norm. So I do think that there has to be something to be said about this gender budget, but in particular in the justice field, because that is where we are. Yes, in others as well. But for the moment, I constrain it to this one. I do think that there are quite a few programs that are coming up on mentorship. There's some learnings we've been able to get because the institutions we work with in New York is plugged into the Brazilian Women Associations, Nigerian, Canada, and so on. So we've been able to get some of, the best practices, if I can call it like that. So it assists that you just leapfrog some of these things instead of trying to research and do your own groundwork. So again, the programs that are focused on mentorship and sponsorship of women, how do we put them together and say, let's do something that is actually meaningful, that is tangible, we learn from each other, and we're actually able to execute and touch a little bit more lives? Because as some of the speakers have said, we want to do the work. We've got the capability, we've got the brain ability. And why is it then that, we will continue to be suing the Minister of Police? And really, I want to also mention how embarrassed I was when the Minister of Health talked to some of the challenges that they are actually having with the lawyers that are initiating illegal claims and, costing the coffers of the government so unnecessarily. So I'm just saying that the opportunities are there, but we just need to continue to work together in an ethical manner. I want to say that there is a role for men in supporting the growth and continued development of women. We've talked about, so one of the speakers did mention that the men, I think that is actually, did mention Bulelani, how he supported her. And most of us, because it's men that are in this position, and it's them that would say, I see a potential, they support you. I've worked closely with Justice Tezwell Papia, and there are many others that have been there for me. So they can also be the agents for change. And what we have seen in the mentorship program is we've included some of those men, like Ujanki, and he's part of the mentors, and he's a man. And just the awareness of what exactly are the challenges that we're facing. So that is not just women talking to other women, but we also bring in support of those men that understand the agenda and what it is that needs to be done. And then lastly, I do think that, I mean, we need to continue to read as leaders, as lawyers, and not just like precedent-based reading. There's so much material that is out there, and people have been reading around issues of lean in, lift as you rise, equal but different. All of these things, they share some of the challenges and how already we can begin to have some tools you can rely on to be able to resolve some of the challenges that we have. But I do think that we need to bring it in under some sort of an umbrella that will bring a focus to some of these challenges. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Ms. Velleman. Your points speak very loudly towards collaboration and the commitment to excellence. And I think the examples that you set, which I think speaks to who you are as a person, having gone to New York and come back to South Africa to create platforms for others. And I think that's really what the PP had also raised. How do we elevate our consciousness to be as supportive to others in our environment? So thank you for your participation as well. There are other, thank you for the recommendations as well. Let's see, they'll come up in the summary later. The NDP, you set the tone for credible, rigorous research that we need on gender issues. But you also set the tone by raising the issues of investments that we make, and not just to societal dynamics, but also investment in terms of the rights-based approach and gender-based budgeting. So that's certainly something that we need to sort of accelerate, but also reinforce and create where there isn't. Now, in your particular area of work, as you also pull through your concluding remarks and any responses to the other panelists, please reflect on some of the lessons you've learned that we need to take forward in ensuring that we feel safe in our country, we respond to issues of gender-based violence. What's the message, the key message that you would like to leave us with in that respect? Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I address some of the issues raised, and I'm acutely aware of the time constraints as well, I think maybe I just want to put the cat amongst the pigeons and say something from a little bit of a philosophical approach. Maybe globally, we need to sort of shift away from a rights-based approach to an obligations-based approach. What is my obligation to the next in a very real way? And can you imagine if the whole world shifted from an obligations-based approach? So you're not demanding stuff. It's about what you can give to improve the life of others. So I don't know. That's my philosophical side coming out. I don't think it will gain too much of traction, but I really think it will be a great country if we can look at what is my obligation to the next person. And whether it's a woman, whether it's a colleague, but in the different contexts, the various true obligations that we have. In terms of the, I think, as I said, also in the interest, there's lots of work we've been doing. I don't want to go into that in any amount of detail, but we know that the scourge against, the violence against women and children is I don't know, I mean, I did a presentation just yesterday, or when was it? I mean, the figures we are looking at, and we got to think about why is this, and this all translates into the impact of women and right from the time we are children, in terms of what our experiences are with violence and patriarchy, which some of the colleagues talked about. I mean, in South Africa, our statistics are that in 2022-2023, between July and September 23, the country recorded 10,516 rapes, 1,514 cases of attempted murder, and 881 murders of women. This translates into 114 rapes per day. I repeat, 114 rapes per day on average. So women are being raped as we speak, every day. And 8 between 8 and 9 women being murdered every day in our country. I mean, our president once said, the men of the country have waged war on our women. And so, you know, the Thuthuzela care centers that we've set up, and, you know, I wish we had more time that I can explain, you know, working with business. And so there are a number of women on this platform that are in the private sector. There was a really big private sector engagement session, I think earlier this week, where big business is coming to support various initiatives to deal with workplace harassment and dealing with you know, violence against women. It was a really, really good initiative. And it was good to see how business was joining government in this fight to deal with gender-based violence. And so, you know, we've got to look at, let's best be clear, prosecutions and law enforcement is not going to solve the problem. There are just too many cases. We are never going to be able to solve the problem of gender-based violence against women, which, as I said, impacts on women throughout their lives and into their adult life. It starts as young as babies. We have babies being raped under a year old. So that is the kind of society we're living in. And so, you know, a lot of work in the fight against women abuse has generally been focused on the fight against gender-based violence crimes. What are we doing as law enforcement? How many people are being arrested? And we can give you these figures. The courts are imposing really, really high sentences. The life sentences, I have those statistics somewhere as well. The life sentences for gender-based violence, for